Hello and welcome to The Top Story, a podcast with the headlines of the day from our correspondents around the world. I'm Qi. Coming up in this edition, Mexico is vowing retaliation after US President Donald Trump approved 25% tariffs on all Mexican imports. Israel's Prime Minister is headed to the United States to meet President Trump on the second phase of the Gaza ceasefire. And the Democratic Republic of the Congo says morgues in Goma are overfilled following offensives by the M23 rebels. We begin in North America. Mexico is vowing retaliation after US President Donald Trump approved 25% tariffs on all Mexican imports. The US and Mexico are each other's largest trading partners. Mexican President Claudia Sheinbaum said she told the US government that they can work together, but never with interference. Alistair Beverstock sent this report from Mexico City.
Mexico's President Claudia Sheinbaum says she's not worried about Donald Trump's tariffs, given the strength of the Mexican economy, in response to Donald Trump's executive order imposing 25% blanket tariffs indefinitely on all Mexican imports to the US starting Tuesday. His Mexican counterpart took to social media. In a post on X, Sheinbaum said, in part, "We must work together in a comprehensive manner, but always under the principles of shared responsibility, mutual trust, collaboration, and, above all, respect for sovereignty, which is non-negotiable. Coordination, yes. Subordination, no." Nevertheless, Sheinbaum said Mexico will retaliate, ordering her finance minister to implement her government's Plan B strategy, imposing tariff and non-tariff measures in order to protect her country's interests.
As they say, the United States is shooting itself in the foot because they're increasing 25%. But there will be a lot of impacts here too. Especially if this continues, because the companies that are here may decide whether they stay here or go somewhere else due to that 25%.
The specifics on those measures and how they will take shape have yet to be spelled out. But the mutual tariffs are expected to impact multiple sectors, both in Mexico and the United States, particularly the manufacturing and agricultural industries, which conduct highly integrated cross-border commerce. Deep trade connections formed over 30-plus years of North American free trade are now jeopardized. Consumers, too, are expected to pay a price. One study estimates average household income in the US would fall by nearly $1,000 a year as a result of the new levies on Mexico and Canada. Mexico, however, continues to encourage dialogue with the Trump administration in an effort to stop an escalating trade war. President Sheinbaum ended her post on X by saying, "Nothing by force, everything through reason and justice," a signal of how Mexico now plans to proceed with the new US administration.
That was Alistair Beverstock in Mexico City. Canada says the first phase of its response to US tariffs will come into effect on Tuesday. The federal government has unveiled a list of goods subject to 30 billion Canadian dollars or $21 billion that includes beverages, cosmetics, and paper products. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau said Canada also intends to impose tariffs on an additional list of imported US products. Canada also says it will file a World Trade Organization claim against the new US tariffs and seek redress under a regional free trade deal. The neighboring countries have interdependent industries, businesses, and interests. Their tariff threats are causing concerns on both sides. Dan Williams spoke with scholars and the public in Ottawa.
For many here, the US tariffs are deeply concerning.
I think in general people are frustrated, and I think people will be a little bit angry about it. And I think what it'll do, it'll rally Canadians together, and we will respond in a unified manner to the U.S.
There'll be a unity of frustration against the U.S. positions. I think the economic impacts will be significant on this country, given the size of the trading relationship.
Trump says he is taking the action due to border security, saying Canada is not doing enough to stop the flow of undocumented migrants and drugs, specifically fentanyl, into the US, an allegation Canada denies. For many here, there is shock and uncertainty following the flurry of tariff announcements. And there is a genuine concern as to just how deeply the tariffs will hurt the Canadian economy. Some analysts say the move could shave billions off Canada's GDP and could plunge the country into a painful recession, with the risk of damage on both sides of the border.
We have a lot of products that are intermediate or kind of inputs. If you buy a car in the United States, chances are there are many parts to it that have been produced in either Canada or Mexico. There's a whole compounding effect that could be very disastrous for both sides in this case, for sure. I have a feeling that we're going to be going into a world that is going to be less globalized, for sure. Okay? There's no question about that. Okay? But also more mistrustful, more nationalistic with the egos, that will ultimately want to impose certain views. And I think we've seen a little bit of that already, okay? But I think we could see a lot more of that, okay? Which I think really spells bad for the world,
For now, the affairs between the US and Canada are on thin ice. But it is hoped that in time, the relationship can get back on track.
That was Dan Williams on the trade war in North America. Meanwhile, US President Trump is defending his decision to impose sweeping tariffs on Canada and Mexico, even as he acknowledges that there may be some negative effects for Americans. Kate Fisher has the details.
US President Donald Trump has dubbed his critics the tariff lobby. Well, in his Truth Social post, President Trump also suggested that it was time for Canada to become America's, quote, cherished 51st state. That way, he said, there would be no tariffs, in addition to what he says would be lower taxes for Canadians and better military protection. Trump suggested that the US didn't need anything from Canada, posting that, quote, we have unlimited energy, we should make our own cars, and we have more lumber than we can ever use. But he did acknowledge the effect that tariffs could have on Americans, asking, will there be some pain? And then answering his own question with yes, maybe, and maybe not, but assuring the American people that it will all be worth the price that must be paid. Well, heads of American industry and corporate leaders are less sure of that, with many of them saying they're concerned about the impact and warning that prices will likely increase for US consumers. Opposition Democrats have also warned of the economic pain that tariffs could bring for American consumers, with Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer urging the president to end the tariffs, saying they will mean higher prices for Americans, and that, he reminds Trump, was something that he campaigned against.
That was Kate Fisher reporting. On the Middle East, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu is headed to the United States. He's expected to meet with Donald Trump, becoming the first foreign leader to meet the US president since his return to the White House. They will talk about brokering a second phase of the Gaza ceasefire. Jonathan Regev has more.
A lot of issues, Paul, to discuss. First and foremost, perhaps the Gaza ceasefire, which for the moment is holding on. And it was only yesterday when we saw another 3 hostages coming back, and Israel releasing 183 Palestinian prisoners. A very big question, will this ceasefire head from stage 1 to stage 2? We're looking at 3 more Saturdays in which 3 more hostages each time should be released. And then once that stage is over, there will be 11 hostages left for the first stage of the ceasefire. According to the list handed by Hamas, 8 of those 11 are not alive anymore, and they should be handed over to Israel in the last day of the first stage of the ceasefire. That is day 42. So this is what Israelis are hoping for. The debate is already not so much on the first stage that we see is actually moving forward. What will happen in the second stage? That stage would include 59 hostages which will be left in Gaza after the first stage. At least officially 24 of them are alive. But there's also opposition as well coming from the far right in the government. Bezalel Smotrich, Itamar Ben-Gvir, and even some members of Benjamin Netanyahu's Likud party, they're saying that the price that Israel has to pay, the complete withdrawal from the Gaza Strip and a complete end of the war, is something that is too much to pay for. Once again, it's up for Benjamin Netanyahu to decide.
That was Jonathan Reggett reporting. At least 4 Palestinians were wounded in an Israeli strike on Sunday on a vehicle on a coastal road west of the Nuseirat camp in the central part of the Gaza Strip. The Israeli military said an Israeli aircraft fired on what the military described as a suspicious vehicle moving towards northern Gaza outside the inspection route laid down by the ceasefire agreement. Rami Almagari reports.
The Israeli drones hit a car that ran on the coastal road, on the Rashid coastal road, which is, according to the ceasefire deal, is blocked and the people not allowed. The population is not allowed to use cars on that road. So the Israeli drone hit a car. In the early in the morning, actually, there was a volley of fire from actually from the sea, and also a drone. A drone hit the road itself and ruined a carriage with a horse. That is during the ceasefire. But Israeli army says that the cars that ran on the coastal road breached the ceasefire agreement, that these cars are not allowed without being inspected, like the case on the Netzarim corridor in which the cars run and vehicles run and being inspected by Egyptian, Qatari and USA officers.
That was Rami Almagari reporting. Finally, in Africa, the Health Ministry of the Democratic Republic of the Congo says morgues in Goma are overcrowded following offensives by the M23 rebels. As a result, more bodies are left on city streets. Fighting has injured more than 2,800 people after M23 seized the eastern city. Chris Okumringa reports from Kinshasa.
The Minister of Foreign Affairs in the DRC has said that there are thousands of people who are trapped with limited access to food, water and medicine, and she's calling on the international community to rein in on the rebels and their backers. The international community, the United Nations, the African Union, the East African Community and the Southern African Development Community have all called on both warring sides to cease fire and to allow a dialogue to take place so that this conflict may be resolved. But the head of the M23 rebels recently held a press conference and said that they are going to capture more territories and march all the way to Kinshasa to topple the government of President Felix Tshisekedi. According to some security officials in the DRC, the M23 rebels tried to enter the province of South Kivu, which neighbors North Kivu, and there were fierce clashes that broke out on Wednesday. The government troops are reported to have repulsed them, pushed them back from the area that they were trying to capture. Some civil society members who were saying that the rebels managed to get into one area of South Kivu province. This is a territory that's very rich in minerals in eastern DRC, and the capture of this area will be a big blow to the Congolese government. There are calls by the international community for peace to be restored in the area. But recently, President Felix Tshisekedi came up with a statement saying that they are going to mount a vigorous and coordinated response to reclaim all the territories that have been captured by the M23 rebels.
That was Chris Okumringa reporting from the DRC. Now, recapping the headlines before we go, Mexico is vowing retaliation after US President Donald Trump approved 25% tariffs on all Mexican imports. Israel's Prime Minister is headed to the United States to meet President Trump on the second phase of the Gaza ceasefire. And the authorities in the Democratic Republic of the Congo say morgues in Goma are overfilled following offensives by the M23 rebels. And that's it for this edition of The Top Story, a podcast that brings you world headlines every weekday. For more news in politics, business, sports and culture, you can subscribe to The Beijing Hour, our one-hour podcast news magazine program. Welcome, appreciate all ratings and reviews. I'm Qi Zhi. Thank you for listening.